Hey, what's up, blue collar business owner? Welcome back to the Blue Collar Prosperity Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Maskill, where we focus on helping guide you to have a prosperous blue collar business. Today, we have with us Alec Stevanovski. Alec is the founder and editor of Home Pros, a digital media company covering the business of HVAC. He publishes free email newsletter every Tuesday, every Friday, comes out in the morning. Great thing for your inbox, covering the biggest news impacting the industry. So that is Alec Stevanovski. Alec, thank you so much for being here. What is going on today?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. No, I appreciate it. Well, let's see. Today it's rainy. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and so it's I'm trying to get through that, but it's good. Things are good.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into what you're doing with Home Pros and especially kind of focus on the HVAC industry. For those of you listening that aren't in HVAC, I still would encourage you to tune in because a lot of the stuff Alec dives into, economy, technology, acquisitions, is really relevant to a lot of different spaces in the home service, blue collar world. But give our listeners, if they don't know who you are, kind of an insight, background story on how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So I in 2020 I started working for a software company called Payzer, and we were, essentially a kind of a field service management software. So we helped contractors, schedule dispatch. We essentially acted as a CRM. We helped them with payment processing out in the field. Helped them, we integrated with financing partners so they could offer finance to their customers. And so it's kind of a full like end-to-end software system. And we specifically targeted HVAC, or HVAC and plumbing contractors. And I spent 3 years there, I'd say most of which was on the sales side of the business. And then the last year I was there, I transitioned over to kind of more of like an internal team. But while I was there, I started understanding the industries a lot, and I started kind of paying attention to what was happening. And I learned pretty quickly like there was a lot going on, because contractors would just tell me that every day when I was trying to sell them software. And I picked up like there's obviously a lot of interest in the space from more traditional financial company, private equity companies. There's a lot of technology changing, given that Payzer existed in the first place, or especially given that Payzer existed in the first place. There's a lot of regulatory changes. I thought that people were telling me that consumers were changing, and that the ways in which they would run their businesses, not necessarily would like totally change, but there were some things that were always shifting. And so I just felt like it was a really dynamic set of industries, and got curious about who supports it all from a media perspective, and how is it covered, how is it talked about, how is it written about, and did a lot of research. And long story short, over probably a 9 month period or so, I kind of went down a rabbit hole of learning digital media, of learning more about the industries, and felt like there was opportunity for kind of a digital upstart to sort of come in and to cover and report on news and trends and things that were impacting people who actually own and manage these businesses, but to deliver all that stuff in a way that kind of better fits the day-to-day now, meaning digital, quick, concise, instead of physical print magazines and things of that nature. So that's kind of that was sort of the initial insight. Kind of came from just my time at Payzer talking with contractors for a few years, and but that's kind of that's where it all came from.
Awesome. Love the story. And I know you have a lot of interesting stories to share. I mean, you started in 2020 in the HVAC, plumbing, electrical space, and you've seen COVID, you've seen the post-COVID. Now we're going into 2025. We've got elections, politics, economy, all the things, not to mention AI and everything else. So you picked a really great time to really start covering it. And I am a subscriber as well. I really do agree that it is quick, concise. But what I really like about it is it really gives you a high level overview of what could be happening based on this is how many units are being delivered, or this is what this company is saying. And it can really help you get your business a lot better information to make a lot better decisions. So let's focus on the first thing that is at hand. There's been a lot of uncertainty, I would say, probably since 2023. Now we're going into 2025 with the economy. What are consumers spending on? Is it a recession? Is it not a recession? Is it still inflation? Is it not? What have you seen and what trends are you picking up on, doing all your research and investigating and interviews from an economic standpoint in the trades, in home service, in HVAC?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot going on. I think it's kind of a weird time. And by no means, I do want to preface this. I mean, I'm not an economist, and so there are people who, study this stuff religiously, and they are, macro, micro economists, and understand a lot better than I do. But just from, the research we do and kind of the stuff we're covering about and the people we're talking to, it's like I always like to say it's almost like there are two, at least how I see it right now, it's almost like there are two like contradictory um themes or like, yeah, I guess themes that exist at the exact same time. So what I mean by that is like on one hand, interest where it's obviously a much higher interest rate environment than it was a few years ago, except for the fact that I think the announcement from the Fed that came out, I think, as we started this. So I'm going to pull that tab up in a couple minutes and see what happened. But so we've been living in a much higher interest rate environment. Consumer sentiment has been kind of volatile. People kind of feel crappy about their finances or the economy. They're very uncertain about what's happening. During COVID, obviously, people accumulated a lot of savings from stimulus checks and things of that nature, but those have been depleted since then. Like that pile that came in has gone out. Um, so there's a couple things there that are just like not so good things or make people not feel that good. However, at the same time, they've kept spending. So if you look at kind of a long-term chart of consumer spending, yeah, you could argue about maybe the rate at which it goes up, but it's just kind of gone up. Like people have continued spending on things. They are wealthier in the value of homes. So the home values have gone up. I think the last time I checked, it was past 5 years, home values across the United States are up over 50%. So they're wealthier, at least on paper. And then there's this idea of, well, interest rates could be cut. And again, like I said, this is today, so I can pull that. I'll pull it up when I'm done here and just kind of peek at it. So that has made people kind of feel maybe a little bit more confident about what could potentially happen over the coming months. So then you have like some of these good things. And so my point in saying that is like, again, there's two like sort of contradictory kind of themes that are existing. One, you can find evidence that says things maybe aren't so good, but then you can find evidence that says, well, maybe they actually are. Inflation has come down a lot since I think it was 2022 when it peaked at like around 9% or the rate of inflation. Now it's like 2.5. So I don't know. It's a very like that's what I'm thinking about and trying to pay attention to now is just like how do you have these two contradictory things that exist at the same time, and then how do they sort of intertwine and like what happens to them, over the next 6 months, 12 months.
Yeah, so let's kind of go into that a little bit further because we've been in it like it's almost felt like a weird thing for like years and years and years. And people are always like, I don't know, are we still doing this? Are we not doing this? What's going on? But like you said, people keep spending. People have more equity in their homes than ever in the history of home ownership. So there are a lot of good things going on. You also track a lot of different data that will tell you actually what's going on in the world, whether it's how many units are delivered or, hey, this person acquired this person, or this is the multiple things they're trading at. What have you seen from kind of a macro level that I would say supports the good thing, like that things are trending in the right direction. People are still spending. Businesses do still have the ability to grow, even though they're not growing like they were during COVID when everybody had so much money and they're sitting at home every day.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'll give a point on like just the general consumer side and then a point on the HVAC side if you're okay with that.
Perfect.
So yeah, one thing to your point, you could look at say a consumer sentiment, for example. So I think it was the last release they did was August, and it was basically at a 6 month high, like coming back when they last reported it in August. And so it's kind of bounced and rebound, in the past 6 months or so. Consumer spending, even just on a year over year basis, it's not up crazy. Sorry, over the past 5 years, it's not up crazy amount, but it's up. Like people have legitimately continued spending into the data. And so those are two big points. I think like actual data points. I think on the HVAC side, this is something that and we just covered this, I think this past week. So AHRI, the organization that represents manufacturers, they report data every month, based, shipments of water heaters, air conditioners, heat pumps, and they kind of put it into this nice, monthly thing, and they just publish it for free. And something that I thought was interesting was, and this is a good thing, coming into, well, first of all, 2023 shipments fell, total shipments of, and this is specifically air conditioners and heat pumps. So it doesn't include, water heaters, for example, fell about 17% from 2022. Now you could say, okay, well, 2021, 2022 were sort of inflated because that was during the time where money was cheap, a lot of this activity was happening, but still it fell 17% from 2022. And a lot of the consensus and kind of the chatter that I had heard coming into this year, people were telling me was, well, think it's going to contract again. 2024 is going to be worse than 2023. Because, and this whole idea is, if you think about the average lifespan of an air conditioner, you could, again, it might vary, but you could say give or take 15 years. And the current years, say like the replacement market, is kind of anchored back to shipments 15 years ago. So basically, if they installed it 15 years ago, it's kind of running out of its useful life, then you need to ship a new one if they want to, customer wants to replace it. And so looking at that logic, 2024, 15 years ago was 2009, wasn't a good year. 2010 was the start of a good year. Then it kind of went straight up all the way through 2022. And so using that logic, you'd think 2024 was maybe worse than 2023, which is what people were saying. However, as of the latest release, which was on this past Friday, now we have January through July's data. So they're 2 months behind. And you look at just year to date total shipments for heat pumps and air conditioners, they're up 3% versus 2023. So it's not so far the case that they're like drastically down. Now, to be fair, yeah, you still have months left. That's something that I thought was interesting because, again, in a good way, because so far it's not, they're not down 10% or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome data to have and really to help listeners, owners navigate, plan, how do they grow their business? Because a lot of times too, with this high interest rate, we might think people aren't building as many homes, people aren't buying as many homes, which means we're not delivering as many units. But you equate high interest rates plus 15 years ago is 2009, and we're still growing. It's probably actually very impressive that we're growing, and it's probably growing a lot higher than that 3% when you take into all the other factors and kind of normalize it. So with that being said, also, a big part of what you cover and a big part of what people have talked about really since 2021, end of 2020, is acquisitions. Probably everybody listening to this show has dreams, goals, plans of having a business that can run without them. And a lot of times, once you get there, we sell our business. Obviously, since 2020, when all services, especially in the home, were determined essential, private equity is like, wow, we should go buy those companies. Fragmented industry, never get shut down, doesn't really matter the economy because things are still going to break. You do a really cool thing of tracking as many acquisitions as you can that you can, get information on. What have you seen, say, in 2024 compared to 2023, maybe 2022? Is private equity still spending money even though interest rates are high? Have the multiples changed because of interest rates? Where is the acquisition world at with all this?
Yeah. So I guess I'll take that in two parts. So one, I mean, I think to answer the question, is private equity still buying companies? Yes, they are. And I think, I mean, obviously there's a number of reasons for that. One of, a couple of which you named, which is just sort of like the structure of the market and that the fact that it makes for, good long-term investment, and, for all the reasons you just mentioned. But I think, 2023, again, worse year than 2022. But if you look at 2022 going back to like 2018, 2023 going back to 2018, there were still multiple, I think it was 3x the numbers, a little over 3x more deals done in 2023 than there were in 2018. So the interest, even though that kind of goes through the COVID years, I mean, interest is still way higher than it was, and I think the number was 2018. But now going into this year, yes, people are still buying. I mean, just from, for example, conversations that I've had recently, it's more so, at least, what people are telling me is it's more so not that they're done buying. I mean, yes, you could argue, people have slowed down. Deal activity has slowed down in 2024. Just pure number of transactions. And that comes from, I think it's Capstone Partners Investment Bank. They put out public research or public data. So deal transactions have slowed down this year. However, it's not like, everyone who works at these, the consolidating companies, the private companies are just on vacation this year, like not working. Like they're working. And something that that stood out to me is that while the transactions have the number of transactions have gone down, there's been sort of a shift in focus on like just pure blocking and tackling and organic growth with the companies that are already under or in a certain platform's portfolio. So that's something that kind of caught my attention. I mean, the thing that kind of sucks is that obviously these deals are private transactions, so not all the multiples get published on every single deal. And so you got to find it through just sort of whispering with people. And so, that's a separate conversation that I have a rant on. Um, but yeah, I mean that's kind of where I'd say it's at. Deal transactions down. A lot of companies, just from what I've been told, are focusing kind of more on blocking, tackling, and doing what they can with what they have. But they're still buying, and they're still out there looking for good companies, and they still are active.
Awesome. And I mean, and part of that blocking and tackling, a lot of times when whoever it is that's acquiring a company, whether it's an individual buyer or private equity or
Yeah.
somewhere in between,
Yep.
they're buying these because they see the opportunity of, hey, we've got to implement service side, and hey, we've got to implement technology. We've got to do a lot of things to then really make it a lot more valuable. We'll buy it at this and then implement all this, and it'll be worth more. So you're also, and we kind of alluded to it at the beginning, you're also at the forefront of a lot of the technology that has come in the space in the last couple of years. Service Titan's obviously been there a long time, but AI is making a big push, and a lot of technology companies, a lot of people just in general are like, and I've had this conversation on different interviews on the show of, a lot of times home service is like 20 years behind everybody else, right? Like, oh, now we're going to put in technology when everyone else has been using it, or now we're going to start doing email marketing when everyone else has been doing it for 20 years. So, or now we're going to be using call centers when, everybody else is using it a really long time. So, what are some of like the biggest things that you've seen from a technology space that you believe or that our listeners might not know that are, making ways into the market and really starting to disrupt things from a how we've always done this? The crotchety old business owner says, well, we've always done it this way and I don't want to change. What are some of those things that are really kind of starting to disrupt the world out there?
Yeah, I mean, a few things come to mind. I mean, one, I think, here's us. I'll say first, then I'll get into kind of some of the examples. But I think it's too late for players to come in and compete with ServiceTitan, House Call Pro, Pays where I came from, all these established players. I think it's too late, in my opinion, to start one of those companies and try to go be sort of the all-in-one kind of integrated platform. I think, they have such an advantage from one, just a brand awareness standpoint. They have a technology advantage. They have, product advantages. They're built out. They have, and so what a lot of, I think the new companies are doing, the model is regardless of what area of the business you focus on, whether you're, and I'll explain some of the companies that, I've talked to recently, but regardless of whether you focus on, say, you're building software for a call center or for, sales coaching or for dispatching, whatever it may be, the model now is they're plugging into the CRMs, to the field service management softwares via integrations. Because the idea is, and obviously contractors don't want to have to use 18 apps out in the field or in their office and have different screens pulled up and kind of have to bounce back and forth. And so as much integration as you can get obviously benefits the contractor, benefits, the vendor, and it just kind of makes everyone's life easier. So that's what it's going to, I think, continue to look like and continue to form, like morph into, is where you're just going to have these, you're gonna have access to as many sort of point solutions and as many tools as you'd like for different parts of the business, but it's all going to be run out of whatever your core system is. Now, what are some of those specific ones? Well, I mean, just kind of a few of them come to mind. Like, some of these companies are focusing on, okay, how can we improve our call center, for example, using, whether it's like AI, and really it's AI. Um, and so there's one company where essentially what they do is they have kind of like it's called an AI agent. And so they can, contractors can actually go ahead and use it to, answer after hours calls. And it's trained on certain data that the contractor feeds it via, whether it's certain scripts or things that their team asks. And basically the idea is to help bring whatever your percentage of after hour call bookings are up by multiples. And so you can recoup a lot of those lost missed calls, and then there's clear revenue impact there. So there's a call center. There's a couple companies that have popped up that are trying to essentially compete with, like, for example, ServiceTitan's dispatching product, Dispatch Pro. There's a number of companies that are all field based, or they're kind of focused on the field, and so helping technicians be more efficient with, whether it's import things as simple as importing pictures, of equipment, include model number, serial numbers. There's parts, sort of databasey kind of companies that technicians can refer to out in the field. And the idea is just to save them time when they need to refer to something, whether that be a manual or certain information around equipment. Um, there's sales technology. So companies like, Rilla and the like, who basically are using call recordings to help sales managers analyze calls when comfort advisors and salespeople go out into the field and kind of figure out, okay, how can we improve here? How can we improve there? And the technology does a lot of the legwork to understand, here's where specifically in certain conversations things can be improved based on XYZ. So sales, I think, is a big one. Um, and then there's obviously, all things on the back end from a reporting standpoint. There's cool, like cool data visualization tools. So I think contractors have gotten pretty good at like taking data from all these different places and kind of putting them all together in ways that they can look at and sort of take action on. And that's kind of I don't say it's a crazy, crazy new thing, but I don't know. Those are some of the things that just come to mind. I hope that answers the question.
It does. And then follow-up question, out of all the things you see, because you talk to a lot of people, you do a lot of research, if you could just pick one thing, one piece of technology or one company that our listeners should go check out, what would that be out of all the things you've seen that you thought, this could really help?
Oh, God, an endorsement. You're asking me to make an endorsement. I don't know,
No
man.
endorsement, just your favorite idea, even if it's just a favorite idea or favorite thing that you've been in the trades now 4 years that you see and be like, wow, that's really cool. I never would have thought of that.
I, man, I think actually stuff companies that are focusing on the field interest me a lot. So there's, I mean, I don't I'm trying to think of the name of the company. There's one called Faraday, which I was talking to a guy recently about. He says he's a big fan of it, and basically the idea is, if technicians are out in the field, it just kind of helps streamline the process of importing a lot of data, equipment and data into whatever their core operating system. In that case, it was ServiceTitan, which with who I was talking to. But also has the ability to kind of search sort of manufacturer and federal databases for recalls. And so there's a couple things that it can do that just sort of help streamline the process for technicians out in the field. That stuff is interesting to me. Not that like any of the office stuff, whether it's call center or, sales, voice recordings, not that it don't interest me, but the field stuff is pretty interesting to me.
Love it. Awesome. Yeah, and there is a lot of cool things out there. I know one of the things that I've seen, I think it's called Pika, Pika,
Yeah.
where it makes the sales presentation better, but then it also like pulls in all the rebates right away. And if there's any local, state, federal incentives to, go more energy efficient, it like kind of links it all together. So there's a ton of stuff out of there, tons of bright, shiny objects. But obviously this is the way we're going. And
Right.
I think for whoever's not adapting it, not adopting it, and not, at least testing out what works and what doesn't work for them, will probably be left behind. So with that kind of final question for you, as we're going into 2025, I know you're not an economist. I know you're not there to make exact predictions, but just from a industry, home services as a whole, what are some of the things you're looking forward to in 2025? Where do you think this thing is going?
Yeah, I think, and so I'm gonna give you kind of an economic answer, and the only reason I'm gonna say this is because I actually just got a notification on my computer as we were talking that the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates by 50 basis points. A lot of people were wondering whether it was gonna be 25 or 50, and they decided to do 50. So that's why I'll give you this answer. I mean, I think the thing that I'll be looking at and kind of paying attention to a lot of stuff around the acquisition side and consolidation. I think it's going to continue to happen. I don't imagine it's not going to, I don't think it's going to go anywhere at all. I think now, given what just happened a few minutes ago, I think there's maybe potential for at least a lot of confidence to be boosted. Whether multiples like see immediate like impacts, that's a different conversation, but I think consolidation is going to continue. I think some of these platforms out there that are already pretty big, I think will continue to get bigger by swallowing smaller platforms, not just independent contractors. I think they'll continue to do that, but I think there's going to be platform consolidation. And I think that's going to be interesting to pay attention to and kind of how that plays out. Um, though that's kind of the big thing that I'm paying attention to is what happens at the platform level.
Awesome. Well, we might have to have you back in 2025 to see actually what went on and then where we're
Sure.
going to go in 2026. But Alex Stevanovski, thank you so much again for coming on the show today, sharing your journey and providing really just a great conversation insight into normally we have, people that own a company that supports
Yeah.
home services, but you're really giving us insight into the economics, the technology, the acquisitions, and all the things that are going on in the space. So really appreciate you coming on and sharing all out there as we continue our journey to prosperity in the blue collar world. Before we sign off though, Alec, where can listeners go to learn more about what you do with Home Pros? How can they subscribe to the newsletter and all the good stuff you got going on?
Yeah, no, so I appreciate you having me on. I enjoyed it. I think, yeah, really simple. I mean, if you just go to homepros.news, so HOMEPROS.news, NEWS, you'll be able to find, just kind of see all of our coverage. You'll be able to subscribe, get our emails Tuesdays, Fridays. That's definitely the easiest way, just homepros.news.
Perfect. There you have it, guys. Homepros.news. Go there, subscribe. It's totally free, but it's a lot of good value that comes in your inbox twice a week in the morning. You can consume it in less than 5 minutes, and it actually gives you valuable information instead of like most news that we don't want to read anymore. So, Alec, thanks again for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul.
And before you head out, if you are ready to have a business that produces consistent positive cash flow so that you can have a financially healthy business and achieve your personal goals, let's make it happen. Head on over to thebluecollaradvisors.com/call to book a free financial assessment of your business. I will dive into the financials of your business, take a look at what's going on, find any red flags as well as opportunities that you have in your business. Let's make it happen. Again, thebluecollaradvisors.com/call. Until next time, remember, what got you here won't get you there. If you're ready for different results, it's time to start doing things differently.